Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 71. He's Dave Bryan, SteelersDepot.com. I am Alex Kozora. Thank you guys for tuning in this Wednesday morning / afternoon / whenever you're listening. Dave, as the show always goes, the breaking news comes in right after we wrap up. So after Monday's show, shortly after, Steelers make their first move. I know I'm jumping into things, but I think it surprised me so much I want to talk about it right away. Firing, not renewing the contract, whatever you want to say, of running back coach James Saxon. To me, that's a shock.
Yeah, and did you say first move? Because that was after Porter, right?
Oh, I think I said after the show, the first thing.
Okay, yeah, and maybe we should extend this show by about 15 more minutes after we're done. That way we can get the latest. It makes you really wonder what's going to happen as soon as we get done with this show today. Obviously, I think the Broncos, and we'll talk about that, supposed to make their decision today, but we'll start indeed with James Saxon. I didn't see it coming. I'm pretty sure you didn't see it coming with Saxon as well. Obviously, the term being used is the same one they use with Joey Porter, and that's not having the contract renewed. But when you look at the performance of the running back, the Steelers running backs this past season, it wasn't disappointing at all. I mean, heck, we went into this season not even thinking we would get to see much of James Conner or Jalen Samuels, because thinking at some point that Le'Veon Bell would be in there. I can remember writing a piece, before, around the start of the season saying, how much will we be able to learn about James Conner and Jalen Samuels in 2018? And obviously not thinking a lot. Well, it turned out to be just the opposite of that. And, when you look at what both those running backs did as far as a pure yards per carry aspect, both over 4.85 or something along those lines, there with their average yards per carry. When you look at what both did in the passing game and how the yards after the catch for both those players were robust. There's no better way to put it. What was the reason behind it? Now, if you break them down by successful run rates, they weren't up there with the league leaders kind of percentages there, but they weren't awful either. And I suppose you could look at that, and I've talked a few times throughout the season about how the Steelers, you would have liked to have been able to see them run the ball better earlier in the game, games, and probably specifically within, let's say, the first 5 to 8 carries of the game. I know pass protection was an issue with both at certain times, but even that seemed to improve up until, I guess, later. I mean, Jalen Samuels I think you had him dinged for a couple of sacks there towards the end of the season. That's probably to be expected, being as how heck we talked about that so much after he was drafted and all. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, was this another? James Saxon comes off as a very caring guy, and one that you wouldn't think would set a poor culture, if you would, along the lines of maybe the way Porter may have done in his time in Pittsburgh. So yeah, it was a head scratcher.
Well said, and I agree. And I know I said Monday that position coaches are tough to evaluate, so maybe there's something behind the scenes that we don't know. I assume, or at least I'd like to assume, that there is some reason that we can't see, can't understand. But the bottom line is, from what we can tell, the players under him all develop. And yes, there are things you'd like to work on, as you mentioned, success rates and running the football earlier better and pass protection. But Le'Veon Bell developed greatly under his tutelage. James Conner developed greatly under Saxon's tutelage, and Jalen Samuels developed greatly under Saxon's tutelage. So, what more do you want from a guy from an on-the-field product? So, of all the coaches I could have expected or thought or reason, would be on the out, Saxon would have been probably just above Mike Munchak in terms of that list. So again, that is a surprising move, and according to at least one tweet from Aditi King Kabbalah, says that players are upset about that, and I certainly understand that.
Yeah, and there's we don't know everything that goes behind closed doors, not even close to everything behind closed doors. So, and we're probably never going to know the reason why this move was made moving forward here, and the way these are spaced out between him and Porter, you have to wonder. I mean, and I know over half of probably the listenership is probably wondering too, is that it? We've gone now. I mean, how many days has it been? A week and a week and a half since the season ended. Is Keith Butler safe? At this point, is Danny Smith safe at this point? And people were immediately after the first few days saying, Dave, what do you think? Does this mean no move has been made? And I said, well, let's give it a little time here first. But I mean, the further that we get into this thing, and if it gets in and past this second weekend, you really do have to wonder if those guys are safe.
So that's exactly where I was going to go with you, is that do you think that, I guess Butler specifically, but I know you've also made the case for letting Danny Smith go. Do you think changes get made there, or when is the deadline for when you will say maybe changes get made to, no, I think they're going to stay? Is it at the end of the week? When do you think it's going to be?
I would start worrying if we get through this weekend.
Yeah.
Do
you think Butler's still gone? Or do you think he might? What are the odds that he stays? I'm sure it's higher now than you thought it was at the end of the season.
I didn't think it would happen like the next day or two.
Yeah, me neither.
After the season ended, but I mean, here we are. I mean, a week and a half.
I thought it was going to happen that week, like a Friday news dump where you can 3-4 guys like the Falcons did. And it didn't happen.
I mean, it's look, I don't think you can rule anything out right now.
Okay.
But like I said, if once we get into past this weekend, how many more meetings do they have to have?
My thought for one reason why they might be delayed in some of this stuff is Tomlin probably wants to go through the exit interview process, which I'm sure takes maybe 2 weeks to do, to talk to all the players, get some of the leaders like Cam Hayward's, impression and thoughts on the coaching situation and things like that. So that's the only reason I can come up with for why this process might be a little drawn out.
And make no mistake, Tomlin's got ties to long-standing ties with Butler and Randy Fichtner too. Maybe he's willing to keep them on the ship.
I hope that's not the reason. If it is, that's going to be a problem.
Right, and maybe maybe they maybe he thinks maybe they don't believe that the problems. That we think that we see on the defensive side of football, maybe they think they're, easily correctable with a little bit more experience and another player or two. I mean, all we can do is analyze from the outside what we see. And look, I mean, make no mistake about it that Butler certainly didn't do himself any favors with during that final week of the season and naming Tyler Eifert and the things that go along with that. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see we could get through this podcast today, and then all of a sudden it come out there. But back to, I guess, the Saxon thing. You wrote up a piece this morning about who possible early, and make no mistake about it, they're just shots in the dark on your end. But who do you see as possibility of replacing James Saxon?
Yep, they are total dart throws, but they're always fun to do. I thought one thing that was really interesting, that at least makes a lot of sense from an experience and a kind of performance and familiarity standpoint, is John Settle, the running back coach for the Wisconsin Badgers, who's been coaching running back since 1998. He's been in college, he's been in the NFL, and I thought the most interesting thing about Settle, well, two things really. One is that he coached James Conner in 2014 when he had his career year, I think his sophomore season, running for 1,700 yards, 26 touchdowns, that monster season. Then he ended up going back to Wisconsin. And he also made a Pro Bowl as a player, so a Pro Bowl running back for the Atlanta Falcons. And I know that just because you have a successful NFL career does not mean that you can coach well. They're totally separate things. But I thought one of the interesting things with the coaching staff is that, the only coach, coordinator, or position coach on the staff that had ever been a Pro Bowl player is Mike Munchak, who's a Hall of Fame player. And I think there is at least some value in that. I think one reason why, of the many reasons why Mike Munchak is successful as a coach, is because he has that kind of resume that players see and they immediately buy in. They go, I know this guy knows what he's talking about because he was a Hall of Fame player. He was a great player, and I have to follow his teaching. So I'm not saying that it's a requirement to have like a successful NFL player, turn coach on your staff, but I think it certainly helps, and I think that resume is kind of attractive too. So that's probably the biggest name for me. Eric Studesville, who coached in Miami, was just let go. That's been a really popular running backs coach for a long time. Was in Denver for forever. So another name to throw out there as well.
Anybody else on that list, or?
Yeah, I'll just run through the other ones real quick. Sherman Smith in Seattle, longtime coach there, got fired at the end of 2017, was out of coaching last year. Tyrone Wheatley, remember him in Oakland days? He turned running backs coach, was in Jacksonville. He was a Steelers training camp intern way back in 2008, so they were kind of aware of him. And then Stan Drayton from Texas, who grew up in Allegheny and grew up in the area and had been there for a long time as well. So another name to keep in mind.
How these guys, it's one thing to be a great player at a certain position, but like you said, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be a great coach, because doing and showing how to do are two different skill sets.
Right, but don't you think there's a little bit of value to it? Don't you think it's kind of interesting the Steelers only have one coach that they may lose, by the way, we'll get to that in a second, that has that kind of resume?
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
I mean, anywhere, head coach, coordinator, unless I'm missing somebody. I think Munchak was the only one, unless I'm forgetting somebody.
Look, Keith Butler played, but...
Yeah, but I'm talking about Pro Bowl, someone that made a Pro Bowl.
Yeah. There is some, don't get me wrong, there is some value there, but once again, we don't know how these guys teach.
Sure. And that's the most important thing. I'm not saying that because you made a Pro Bowl, you're a good coach. Like, I push back on the idea that Hines Ward should be a receivers coach or coordinator because he played well. I get it. I'm just pointing it out there that I think it's a nice feather in their cap.
Right, I agree, and we're probably not going to know about a replacement for any of these guys for several more weeks. I was just looking back too on we talked, I think, on the last show about, boy, I wonder how much longer we have to wait until Art Rooney II puts up the bat signal and all. And looking back, I think it was February 7th last year, and here we are. It's January 9th today. I mean, surely we're not going to have to wait 3 or 4 more weeks for Art Rooney to come forward and have his annual meeting with the media.
I hope not, but he may want to just lay low for a little while. Let things kind of cool over, blow over, I should say. So yeah, I wonder when these coaching hires are going to get replaced. I wonder if they're going to take their time. They didn't hire anybody, I think it was February 8th last year. They didn't hire Dunbar and Bradley, so I'm curious what the timetable for the replacements for Saxon and Porter are going to be.
And you have, of course, the Senior Bowl coming up here in a couple more weeks. Not that it's a prerequisite to have your position coaches all in line there, but not long after that with the pre-draft process and all, getting ramped up.
For sure. Dave, we'll stick with the coaching situation for one more topic. Mike Munchak, sounds like it's down to him and Vic Fangio for the head coaching job in Denver. Reports are, and this may already be news by the time you're listening to this, but reports are the decision for the Denver job will be made today. So it seems at best 50-50 if Munchak becomes the head coach of Denver. And
I think there's a beat writer or two from the Denver side of things that and I don't how much you read into that, take it for what it is. They seem to think that Vic Fangio is the leader, has the better chance of the two, but that really doesn't mean anything. Elway, I think, is quoted as saying he'd like to have somebody that's kind of an authority on the side of the football. Now, Munchak, obviously an authority as far as offensive line goes, but Fangio an authority when it comes to overall defense. So, and then you look back at Munchak's coaching career in Tennessee, wasn't all that great. And, look, Munchak probably would have, probably to it. He probably his coaching career in Tennessee would have lasted longer had he, taken the directive of firing some guys on his staff, and he didn't want to do that. So, I don't know how much of him. I don't want to say insubordination, because I don't think you'd call it that. It's just more loyalty and believing in the guys that he has in place. But it makes you wonder, maybe, because and look, he never really had a quarterback there, right? In Tennessee, if you will, he didn't have success there overall when you look at the record and all. So it makes you wonder how much that plays into it. I've never been convinced, and look, maybe he'll get, and I, if he wants to coach, I hope be a head coach again. I hope he gets that opportunity. But I think he still has a lot to prove as a head coach. Talking about Munchak.
Well, yeah, I mean, he was 22 and 26 in Tennessee. I mean, he wants it. That's why he wants to be a head coach again, because he knows he believes he can do a better job, and there's so much to prove. And I think the Denver job really aligns for him. I think it's just a good job to go into. I know there's pieces you got to fix and all that, but I think it's a good job to go into. And I think that, his family being in Denver certainly helps a lot. And that's the reason why you're seeing him turn down the Arizona interviews last year. He turned down the Miami interviews this year. I mean, he wants somewhere where the fit has to be perfect. And it sounds like for him, at least, the Denver fit is perfect for him.
You would agree that it's Denver or bust right now when it comes to him.
Yep, he's either taking the Denver job or he's coming back to Pittsburgh.
Yep. So if I know Steeler fans are rooting for the latter.
Yep. So that should be known, I guess, probably later today, later Monday. But again, if they do lose Munchak, as much as that would suck, I do like the plan B in Sean Surratt. Assuming that Surratt does not go to Denver, I understand that, but I think Surratt would probably stay, because if he goes to Denver to be an O-line coach, why go there when you can just be the O-line coach in Pittsburgh and stay at home and kind of get out of Munchak's shadow and do your own thing?
Yeah, exactly. I would think, and that's dangerous. Look, we didn't see the change coming there with James Saxon, but one would think that if Munchak does go, that Surratt would be the guy to fill in for him.
Yeah, because honestly, had it not been, I think I said this last week, had it not been for Munchak becoming available when he did, Surratt would probably be the offensive line coach after Bicknell, who Munchak replaced.
Exactly.
So they have a lot of faith and trust in Sean Surratt. Dave, I guess.
What do you think about the Arizona hiring?
That was a weird one. I mean, I could never bash a head coaching hire too much, because especially a totally unproven guy like Cliff Kingsbury, who knows how things will work out. I'm sure people would downplay Sean McVay's impact and Matt Nagy's impact. So I don't want to say that's a bad hire, but to go from, generally unsuccessful head coach at Texas Tech, then you take an offensive coordinator job at USC, and now all of a sudden you're considered an NFL head coach candidate. That's a leap I did not anticipate.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming, the way that whole last 45 days transpired with Cliff. Didn't see that coming. I'll tell you this, they whenever and look, it's a copycat league, right? Get someone in, young, innovative offensively, and with a young quarterback and go that route. But boy, you better surround yourself. You better make sure you have that defensive side of football taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know everyone wants to find them next, Sean McVay and Matt Nagy and all that. And I think most of these hires are almost made specifically just to fix their quarterback, because the idea is you fix the quarterbacks, the rest of the team you can work with. But there's so much more to a head coach than just being a good offensive mind. A good offensive mind is great for an offensive coordinator or a quarterback's coach, not necessarily for a head coach. You got to be able to lead, you got to be able to delegate, you got to manage problems, you got to be able to juggle your own time. So like for me, being a good offensive mind 10th on the list for what I need in a head coach. And so that's my concern there, is that there's so much of a focus on just get a good mind that you're not thinking about the other responsibilities of the position and how you handle what you're going to be handling 95% of the time.
How close do you think we are? What's going to be the new trend? Are we going to start seeing the young college defensive coordinators next, because they're used to handling these young, innovative offensive minds? I mean, the guy in Clemson obviously is the one that comes to mind, but I think he's got a kid in school there at Clemson. I think another one not far behind him or something, I think I read. Is that coming? Instead of these old Wade Phillips and some of the Vic Fangio and some of these old Todd Bowles, some of these older defensive minds, are they have a chance of becoming extinct pretty soon, or more extinct?
I think it's going to continue to go with the young offensive mind that we're seeing now. My thought for the next quote-unquote big thing is with everyone trying to spread things out and run 3-4 receivers, who's going to run that counterculture and go to the run game and go with a really power kind of heavy old school approach where everyone's going because everyone else is in dime and has dime backers out there and stuff like that. So kind of similar to what Baltimore's done, but hopefully with maybe more effectiveness in the passing game. I'm waiting for that kind of older approach, kind of how cyclical the NFL is. So I think that's the next thing that'll happen in the NFL 10 years from now, is someone going to a true kind of run game to counter all the speed and athleticism that defenses now have.
So the fullback's coming back, baby.
I think the fullback in 10 years from now will be a thing again.
I tell you, when you look at some of the things, though, that's going on, I mean, offensively with these young offensive head coaches, and then you look at what's going on in the college game and all, and especially the national championship game. Yeah, how surprised were you at that?
Very surprised. It looked like it was going to be a great close game, going up with 3 touchdowns in the first 5 minutes, and then Clemson just rolled from there.
Yeah, that defense really played well from Clemson.
Can we hire that defensive coordinator, Brett Venables? I know you said he's got a kid in school.
Yeah, and that's why I was talking that way. I mean, that guy. You want to talk about a guy that did a great job of disguising coverages. Mm-hmm. Especially on that one interception, right, where they show the kind of show a cover 2 look and then rotate into more of a cover 3 then, and Tua never saw it coming.
Yep. I think that guy's getting paid like $2.5 million a year. He's getting paid a crazy amount at Clemson, though.
And then we saw on even the early pick 6, the old trap.
Yep. Jump number 2 out.
You would like to see, that's one of the things that and I've mentioned it several times throughout the season here, and obviously when it comes to the Steelers, you'd like to see more of it too, is, man, just try to do a better job of disguising of what you have. And that's what Wink Martindale's been able to do in Denver there. That's so impressive. And I think when you look around the league as well too, the better you're able to disguise some of this stuff pre-snap, the better the chance you have of confusing, especially some of these younger quarterbacks in the league.
It's not even an option to me anymore. You have to disguise. You have to get quarterbacks confused because there's so much preparation, there's so much game planning, so much tape out there, and everyone's too smart that if you're playing something and you're not disguising and rolling and stunting and slanting, I mean, you're going to be picked apart unless you have super high-end talent, which most teams in this defense certainly does not currently have. So I will say that I thought the Steelers did more of that and played more disguises and as the year went along, as some of the new guys got more comfortable in the system. And so I think some of the reasons for the lack of disguises weren't just Keith Butler's decisions. I think he was kind of – his hands were tied, but certainly something that has to continue for 2019.
And blitzing less, right? I mean, Steelers still remain one of the heaviest blitzing teams – in the NFL. I mean, you just can't, if you're not disguising it well, you just can't keep blitzing. And we talked about that before the Saints game as well, too. And Drew Brees was hollering out during the game who was coming, those kind of things. So one thing, it goes back to the better a defense can do by getting pressure with 4, the more success you're likely to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just looking for more creative 4-man rushes. I thought Butler did a good job of that early in the year. I thought it kind of went away as the year went on. Maybe offenses adjusted to it. But, yeah, just picking your spots of when to blitz, when to put your foot on the gas, when to take it off, and kind of how you blitz to be more effective there. And so my last thought with a defense is that you're going to see probably a lot of changing pieces this offseason, which is fine. You need it. But the downside to that is, again, it may make you a little more vanilla early in the season as guys get used to their roles and playing in the system and playing with new guys, that you might not disguise that stuff as much as you'd like to.
How many new faces will there be on the Steelers defense
in terms of starters?
Yeah, I mean, we talked ahead of the season started too about, is this, not so much an 11-man unit as it is a 15-man unit, along those lines. And yeah, sure, injuries at the beginning of the year with Burnett, caused Terrell Edmonds to have to play a lot earlier than they thought, and then of course, using a lot more dime packages along those lines and all. But I mean, when you look at pure starters, I mean, you look at the top maybe 13 guys. I mean, how many of those guys are going to be different this next go around?
I mean, you really could show what it'd be 4 different positions: corner, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, dime, safety. But those are positions that you could use a new starter at. but are you going to be able to find all those guys right away? Probably not. Maybe find one or two of them, but I don't think you're going to find four, in one offseason. So, but realistically, 1 to 2, ideally, I would say 4.
And boy, you sure would hope that Edmonds makes a big jump in year 2.
He finished out the year strong. I give him a lot of credit. He played an insane amount of snaps. He played almost half the special team snaps, which is what he was supposed to do as a kind of a backup sub kind of guy. Then he became the starter, and they kept the special teams work. So to do all that, to play better as the year went on, it didn't feel like he hit the rookie wall. If anything, it felt like he got better as the year went along, which is pretty rare for a rookie, especially what a 21-year-old underclassman should be a senior at Virginia Tech right now. So I think there's a lot to improve on, and I still would have taken, Justin Reed from Stanford over Terrell Edmonds, but I think that there's some promise to go on to close out 2018 going into 2019.
All right, closing out the coaching talk. BA is back, baby.
Unretired again, like the third time. You like the hire?
I
like the hire.
I understand the hire. I mean, the thing is how will that year off from football, giving BA a chance to look around at things he needs to change, is it going to be enough? Because obviously Jameis Winston is on. I mean, this is it, right? I mean, one final shot this year. If I'm BA, I still think I'm going to draft a quarterback this year, and who knows, maybe even another one in 2020 as well too. But he likes those big-bodied. I mean, obviously, it's an easy narrative, the big body, strong arm quarterbacks, and he definitely has one in Jameis Winston. So, can he be the quarterback whisperer one more time? Will he use the running back out of the backfield more, the way he did there in Arizona? Going into his time in Arizona, that wasn't something that BA was known for. I mean, he was verticals, baby.
Yeah.
Let the quarterback fend for himself and take the hit. So it'll be interesting to see. Someone tweeted me this morning, in fact, with BA in Tampa Bay now, has Tampa Bay become a potential landing spot for Le'Veon Bell? And I suppose it's possible.
I think it's possible too. It's just funny, like it's just basically the Arizona Cardinals 2 Electric Boogaloo. Like they hired Byron Leftwich and Harold Goodwin. It's just the Cardinals' old staff now coming and migrating to Tampa Bay. So we'll see if it works there.
Yeah, that's going to be a tough division to win in with the Saints and the Falcons and all along with that. So interesting. I understand the hire.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to throw it all over the yard. Like, Mike Evans is going to have 20 touchdowns next year because it's just going to be 4 verts and throwing fades to Mike Evans the whole time.
And they're obviously not – I mean, I think Deshaun Jackson said he wanted out. And
yeah, it's not coming back.
I mean, they got a good young receiver over there in the kid out of Penn State.
Yep, Godwin's good.
Godwin and all, and, of course, Mike Evans and all. So if they got – if they went out and got them – a running back that can do the things that Le'Veon Bell can do. I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, I don't think you can rule it out as a potential landing spot for Le'Veon Bell.
No, I can't rule anything out. Other head coaching hires expected to come today. Denver and Cleveland should make their decision. I think they're between Freddie Kitchens, who got elevated to offensive coordinator after Haley got the boot, and Kevin Stefanski, I think. I forget where he was at. Minnesota, I think, is the offensive coordinator, taking over for Flip, I think, was the interim head coach or OC. So I think maybe they're going to go with Freddie Kitchens. Sounds like.
I think so too, and I understand that because the second once Kitchens took over, and when we saw some of the strengths of Baker Mayfield come out, so
yep.
Why would you want? I mean, such a young quarterback, you want him to remain as comfortable as possible. Do you really want to bring in a whole new offense and offensive coordinator? And I would do my best if I were them to try to get Greg Williams to stay, but that's probably, Greg Williams is probably going to get his feelings hurt after all this. So
yeah, but my concern again is that you're taking a really good offensive mind in Freddie Kitchens. I love what they did with the offense, but now you're making him a head coach, and there's so much more to being a head coach than just being a good mind and being a good mentor for Baker Mayfield. And that's where I think some teams might get themselves into trouble.
Yeah, I understand that.
So we'll see what the hiring process is there today. Dave, you had a really good because we're in the off season now, and it is kind of still weird to think about that, just out of the first week of January. But getting into draft talk because the Senior Bowl is coming up, and we're going to start putting our eye into the draft. And you had a really good kind of tape breakdown of Byron Murphy, a corner from Washington, that, as you said, and I think you're right about it when you say it, it's probably going to be linked heavily to Pittsburgh during this process. So you did the video on Murphy. What'd you think about him?
Yeah, and it's just the look, when I start with these guys, and I'm way behind, and I know you are too, with this thing, and we focus on the Steelers throughout the year. We know the top college players, but we're just now getting into deeper dives into their tape and all like that. And really with Murphy declaring this past week out of Washington, I thought, well, that's and you posted, I think Sports Illustrated or somebody had a mock draft that had him linked. I think this is a guy that's going to be linked to the Steelers, probably especially in the early stages of this pre-draft process. He plays cornerback and he makes plays, so that I'm sure a lot of Steelers fans are okay with that, with him being linked to the team this early in the process here. And my initial look at him was go in and look at all 7 of his interceptions and all. I mean, just in 2 seasons, or really not even 2 full seasons, 7 interceptions and I think 20 pass breakups. So I went with the beauty of the internet and YouTube now, and this kind of the search tools that I use, I can kind of quickly compile all those things into one quick highlight tape. And he does. I mean, he has some impressive pass breakups in his tape. He has a impressive interception or 2 or 3 in there as well too. Although one of them, I think it was even in the highlight one that you had, the receiver slipped and the ball bounced off of him right into Murphy's hands. But you need to make those plays too, right?
Yeah, I mean, Steelers had the ball in their hands a lot this year. Didn't finish.
He has nice ball skills. I think that sticks out on tape initially. It looks like he's got experience playing both man and off. Now, granted, I have not gone through. I want to make this clear. I've not gone through, a deep run of like 3 of his games or all like that. It's just kind of spot picking out his highlights, and that's always dangerous to do. But it's a good starting point, I think, to let you know how he made the plays. And all. Now he is a little bit undersized. What's the weight on him?
170, I think, which is really light. But he's only a redshirt sophomore, so he's got a lot of growing to do.
Right, and it's going to be interesting to see how he runs. He
better run fast at 170.
Right. Now he looks pretty fearless, at least on the initial kind of look that I looked at. I mean, he's not afraid to come up and pop. It doesn't look. It also it looks like he's not afraid to peel off his guys as well too if he spots something. So it looks like there's he has a little bit of and they probably gave him the ability to do so well as well at Washington, kind of freelance, if you will, to kind of drop off of a coverage. And that's one thing that makes Alabama their defensive scheme so good, is the defensive backs are in that pattern matching kind of coverage and all, be able to read and make reads off of that and come off and make plays. And he's got a little bit of that in his tape as well too. So, is he a slam dunk first round guy? I'm not to that point yet, but right. I mean, I think he's, top 60, right? You would think, but that once again, that's dangerous to do. Not even looking at the whole crop that's out there, and this really being the first guy that I've done, went into the tape a little bit on there. So impressive. It's understandable why he's coming out now, and top 5-6 corner, you would think.
Mm-hmm. What are the traits you're looking for in a corner? Not just Murphy, but in general for the Steelers specifically. What traits do you want to see them target on?
Well, yes.
That's everything.
I mean, you want a guy that can play both, man press, off, zone. Mm-hmm. You want somebody that has some football IQ to him, Yep. Bless Artie's heart, but Artie Burns' heart, but I just don't think he grasped a lot of it, when it
clearly.
When it comes to the X's and O's end of it. You want somebody that's that's gonna be able to help out in the run and not afraid to stick the face in the fan. Per se, I mean, look, one of the worst draft picks the Steelers have made in the last 5 years is probably a Gerard Holloman, a guy that, obviously he was a safety, but, you can't just judge a guy just because he was in the right place at the right time. I remember going back and looking at Holloman's tape and saying, okay, yeah, all those interceptions are nice, but look how they kind of happened. And then on top of it, you just look at the lack of tackling ability and the lack of want to in there, and immediately you were turned off by him, and it makes you wonder, who was the one that signed off? Who was the scout that signed off on that? Did I lose you?
Sorry, my mic was muted. I went to blow my nose and had my mic muted, forgot to unmute it. Yeah, Holloman was really the definition of a flyer, and it really had no chance to work.
I mean, what are you looking for in him?
I mean, all those things. I was really saying, because I mentioned before, the ball skills, the impact player, you want a lot of things. You want to be able to play man zone and, bump and run and tackle, blitz, and be a good football IQ guy. But for me, it's really that football IQ and the ball skills playmaking. If you don't have that, I can't draft you, even if you have all those other traits.
Well, Artie Burns had some interceptions on his resume.
Yeah, but did you really think it was a playmaker?
Not really.
So that's my point. I'm not saying you just look at the box score. You have to look at the quality of the impact plays, but you need to have those impact plays.
Well, sometimes it looks like especially when it comes to some of these DBs, it looks like they might be box score scouting.
Right. Yeah, already had 1 year production. He did have 6 picks his junior year, but I never felt like he was a big kind of playmaker.
And like I said, too, and I've said this several times, when it comes to him, one of the big red flags I thought with him is why wasn't he on the field all the time,
mm-hmm.
In that Miami defense during his junior year.
Right, yeah. We know all the concerns with Artie, but that's the thing for me is that you can have a lot of traits, but if you're a corner without those ball skills, without making those big plays, I can't have you in Pittsburgh because that's what you need, and that's what you don't have right now.
And the thing about being in the 20 spot this year, a little bit higher than the Steelers obviously normally pick, you're probably going to be right there in that cusp of maybe getting the second or third best perceived cornerback, right?
Yeah, but there's still talent there. You can still find a guy.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying you can't find a guy. I'm just saying you better have your homework done.
And you are in maybe a little better position to trade up this year if you want to move up to a 15 spot to get maybe the top guy or the second best guy. So more flexibility this year.
Sure.
Dave, I was kind of putting the topic off because I think we've talked about it so much. We'll try to keep it brief today. I don't have a whole lot to add, but more Antonio Brown talk. Ryan Clark has spent a lot of time. He's kind of become the media guy focusing on Antonio Brown in this saga, sharing a lot of stories about AB's past. So I'll just hand the baton to you in what's going on with AB world.
Yeah, and I don't think we've learned anything new. In fact, I'm pretty sure.
Have we learned anything new at all this week and a half?
If anybody's benefited from all this with the media coverage, it's Ryan Clark. I mean, he's on all these shows right now. Now, I understand how much of this. Do you think there's, even though Ryan Clark says no, I'm an analyst, I don't hold grudges. Do you think there's a little bit of grudge there between the two? Because of what kind of transpired maybe back in, when was it, 2012 and all. Do you really believe that Ryan Clark wasn't alone or wasn't alone in the fact that thinking, boy, once you get this guy some money, he's got to look out for the monster he becomes?
Yeah, I don't think he was the only one. I don't know if there's a grudge there. I'm sure they're not sending each other Christmas cards anytime soon, but I think Clark's just being asked to give his opinion because he was teammates with AB, and who better in the media to talk about AB than a former teammate? And
he's never been shy about having a microphone in his face.
That is also very true.
I keep going back to, I mean, we hear all these people coming out and saying, and then Deion Sanders chimes in with what he had to say during, I guess it was Prime and 21, whatever they call that segment on NFL Network. Deion's angle, I think, was more of trying to go after Peter King for not voting AB All-Pro.
Okay.
And I think that was the
I
whole.
don't even believe Deion's words, though, because Deion says it was an excused absence, and that's not true.
Well, you go back and you read the transcript of what Tomlin had to say, in the season-ending press conference. It made it sound like AB showed up on Thursday, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, he was sent home on
Friday.
So like that part is excused, but the Friday evening Saturday stuff is not excused. He was supposed to be there Saturday, didn't show up, and no one could contact AB.
Right, for the mock game or mock walkthrough or whatever and all like that.
So I guess Deion's technically right when he talks about it being an excused absence during the week, but that's because AB lied about his knee injury and the team sent him home. And that's not new information. Tomlin's openly said that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Deion's a guy that I don't put a lot of stock in him saying, "Well, I have sources,"
Yeah.
that kind of thing there. We're probably never gonna know what all transpired there.
We do know, though, that AB is not going to be in the Pro Bowl. A pretty predictable decision, considering you weren't going to be around that media firestorm. With the injury, they are labeling it, but considering some of the workout videos AB's posted, that knee's looking pretty healthy.
I'm not a bit surprised that he backed out. I talked about this on the show the other day,
Right. It's a good decision. It's the one good decision AB's made, I think, in the last 2 years.
It's a decision I would make if I were him.
It's not even a decision. Like, you can't show up there. That's going to be a total mess.
I bet everybody else from the Steelers who's going to the Pro Bowl is glad. And like I said, if I'm a Steelers player and I do show up at the Pro Bowl, you're going to get the obligatory questions about AB right off the bat. But I would try to give the cliche answers and then tell him I'm done with it. I mean, you're not going to get a guy like Alejandro Villanueva to talk about it, and it'd be interesting to see if some of the other ones, how in depth they get on this. Look, the overall thing is, and Cameron Hayward said it best in kind of his most recent interview as well too. Was, I think they all know the value that AB brings to the team. I mean, in fact, I know that how can you not? But you just need him to be a better teammate, and there just needs to be some sort of understanding that it's got to be the team first when and if he does come back. And Andrew Brandt from Sports Illustrated, the former VP of the Packers, had a quick article that I recapped yesterday on the site and all of why Andrew Brandt's kind of adamant. They're not going to trade or cut AB because of all that dead money that's involved. He just cannot see them trading or cutting him just from the dead money aspect alone, even though the Steelers will technically save, a little bit over $1 million in cap space. Andrew Brandt feels that business decision wise that it's just not something that the Steelers are going to do. But yet you have the major media honks and even some of the local media. I think Jerry Dulac's gone on the radio a few times and said he firmly believes that the Steelers will move on. And this is one of the most, him and Ed Bouchette are one of the longest running, kind of, if you will, esteemed beat writers who cover the team. So those guys are not saying that those guys aren't wrong and haven't been wrong in the past, but he seems to think that the Steelers will be willing and won't be shocked if the Steelers move on from the AB.
Yeah, it's certainly possible, but I get Brandt's point. It's because basically if you trade AB, think about life, a roster with $1 million more in cap space, but no Antonio Brown, and so that's a lot to try to fix without having a lot of money saved to do so.
There's got I don't want to beat the dead horse on this, but they've got to try to get to some kind of understanding. And like I've said the whole time, what you got to make sure you have the mechanisms in place to handle him the next incident.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the next incident going to be? Because there's going to be a next. We're not going to if AB's back. There's not going to be us wondering, oh Lord, how there's going to be some as the Steelers turn type something related to AB, whether it's something he's done off the field away from the team, whether in pouting or throwing a water cooler or something. There's going to be a next time, and they have to make sure they have a proper mechanism in place to deal with that, even if that mechanism is sitting him down for a game. But, I mean, is this going to just start him, is it going to get worse? Is he going to get sat down and pout and all like that? Because, I mean, you go back and watch these interviews from this past season with AB. I mean, he's more reserved, more, I don't want to say darker, but, more me against you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I know Ray Fittipaldi had an article that kind of hinted at a different AB this year, and there were certainly a lot more incidents this year and a lot more kind of weird comments. It's hard for me to paint with a broad brush about him in general. Was he a darker, interviewee than usual? I don't know if that's true or not, but yeah, I mean, we've said all we've had to say about that is that if you want to try to make it work with AB, and you have to find a better process so these things don't happen to the degree that they're happening again. But again, we have no idea if he's talked to the team since the season ended. If he's been, I don't think he's been in Pittsburgh, so I'm not sure when he would have talked to him. Right.
All right. Now here's something. Let me take us a different direction when it comes to AB. I mean, everybody talks about what a hard worker AB is. AB loves to practice. AB during the off season, not going to find a guy that. It's a cliche, I guess. You're not going to find a guy that works harder than him, but you're probably not going to find a guy that works harder than him. With that said, this past season, Antonio Brown became the 12th, according to Pro Football Reference, in the database there, he became the 12th different player at the age of 30, turning 30 during a season, became the 12th different player to record 100 or more receptions in a season. The last player to accomplish that feat, believe it or not, was Jason Witten back in 2012.
Wow.
Now, I guess where I'm going with this, and I think if you look too at go on up from age 30 or higher, obviously the list starts to shrink a little bit of players with 100-yard receptions, past the age of 30 there. At what point do you start getting concerned about father time in all this?
Not for another 3 years, I'd say, because I think receivers can play longer than, say, running back and some of those other positions, and just the way that AB's taking care of his body, hasn't suffered many major injuries to his body as a whole, and just, has always kind of done the right thing now for many, many years. I think that's going to help him in the long run. So I don't really worry about that slowdown until maybe 34, 35 years old.
Right, and I agree. There was no visible. His catch percentage was down, obviously, this year, but
Ben threw him some bad balls.
Right. Especially during the first part of the season, especially some of those deep balls. I remember writing about that in the first 5 or 6 games about Ben being way off the mark on some deep throws.
Yeah, the only thing that I saw a little different this year in terms of things getting a little worse, and I mean just a little worse, was some of the after the catch stuff. He didn't feel as elusive and breaking as many tackles as he did in the past. But maybe that's just me, just overthinking it.
I don't know. What was the game? Was it against Atlanta? When was the game early on where you get him singled? I'll take my chances with him out in space one-on-one.
What do you mean by that?
Offense, you're gonna take your chance? What was the one touchdown that he had kind of earlier in the season? The screen out to the right where he beat the defense.
Tampa Bay, I think there was one. That was a touchdown he had. He broke, I think, 2 tackles.
I want to say it's Tampa Bay too, but for some reason I want to say I'm wrong.
There was definitely a screen against Tampa where they threw a quick screen to him. He took it the rest way. AB broke some tackles this year. He made some great plays. The Jacksonville game, he makes Ramsey miss at the end. I mean, he did that. It just didn't feel as frequent as I'm used to.
Do you think he's had if he, assuming he returns to Pittsburgh in 2019, do you think he will have another 100 catch season?
Yes, I think he does it for the next 2 to 3 years, regardless of where he's playing.
Okay. Yeah, I agree as well. I mean, there's no reason to not think that. I'm just throwing that into the discussion with him. Because Father Time is undefeated. It's just how long is it going to take him to track down AB?
I think it'll take just longer because of the way he's taking care of himself, because of the way that he's working. He's really, again, no major injuries. Has he ever had a surgery before? That knee get repaired last year? Do you remember? I think maybe it did.
Was it the knee or was it the? Didn't he have a bruised? The injury against New England wasn't surgery.
Right. Okay, that's what I'm asking. It wasn't surgery.
I don't remember it being
like
surgery.
I know it wasn't surgery at the time. I didn't know if he got it worked on in the off season though. It was not surgery at the time.
I don't remember that being the case with him.
So he hasn't had that scar tissue and all his work done that builds up over time. So that I think those are all things in his favor.
That's the only thing I would say when it comes to him. But once again, I mean, the guy's still off. Nobody's better at stacking guys off the line and getting separation off the line. And I mean, look, he understands how to play bend ball better than anybody on the team right now.
Well, Juju's pretty good at bend ball. I think Ben looks to Juju more than he looks to AB in those scramble drills.
Well, Ben early on in the season did kind of force a little bit, and you look at those interceptions early on. Most of his interceptions was him probably trying to, especially the game against Atlanta, right? I mean,
that red zone was just the worst.
That was a brutal series right there.
Yep.
But regardless, I mean, he has got to understand that he's probably not going to get the amount of targets that he was used to getting in the past, and he can't pout and sulk when a guy like Juju has 130 yards and 10 catches.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He's never had to have really that true number two with next to him before. He's had a lot of good players next to him before, but never someone to Juju's caliber. So that's something he's got to adjust to.
I suppose everybody's ready for us to stop talking about AB now.
Yeah, I was going to segue real quick out of that. I got about 10 minutes left in the show. We got some reader emails, maybe the ones that aren't AB related you want to get to?
Yeah, do we have you want to cover the latest future? Connor Sheehy signed to a reserve futures contract yesterday. Former Wisconsin Badger, played mostly kind of a defensive tackle role with him, but size and characteristics and all kind of more conducive to a 3-4 tech, or maybe a 4-5 tech, if you will, along those lines. There had 6 sacks at Wisconsin. A couple okay ones in there. I quickly tracked down all of those and have that in the post as well too. So definitely a guy that going to be a long shot, but with the turnover that we're expected kind of at the back end of the defensive line unit this offseason, you can understand why they inked him to a reserve futures contract.
And real quick, Dave, while you're getting the emails pulled up, speaking of futures contracts, a report from Bob Labriola, Steelers.com today, the Steelers did not offer Matthew Thomas a futures deal. He ends up going to Baltimore. So a little surprising there, but given kind of his fall from where we thought he could be to him really not making much of an impact anywhere, I guess it's not a big surprise.
Yeah, I mean, I still kind of find it surprising that they didn't at least offer him a deal.
Yeah. I think it just shows the issues he's got above the neck, and they just figured it wasn't workable.
Yeah, I mean, look, we could be come the start of next season, seeing his name on the waiver wire. You know who?
I know I mentioned him as like a Vic Soto last week, but the name that he really reminds me of is Howard Jones, who had some success in Tampa Bay, had like a 4-sack season, but was always a guy with a lot of athleticism, but just the dude couldn't go through a drill without getting yelled at, without making mistakes at training camp. So just somebody that always had talent. It may spark a little bit in an NFL Sunday level, but it will be a short burst.
Well, yeah, but that Matthew Thomas sure could run, though.
Yeah, right. Howard Jones could run. He was a great athlete, but the dude just didn't know what was going on.
All right, I suppose we shall get to anybody else, any other roster or housekeeping that we have to do here. One quick note about Javon Hargrave. I'm going to be posting about this later on today. Proven performance escalator. In short, he's going to get a nice little raise in 2019 due to him hitting the proven performance escalator. We've seen players like Jesse James and
Villanueva, I think, got a big boost.
No, that was the other program that they had that's related to playing time and all like that. With the proven performance escalator, it's got to be a former draft pick from the 3rd round and later to hit playtime percentages 2 out of 3 years.
All right. I did not know that.
Yeah, the Villanueva one is.
That's just.
I'm at a loss of what they call that off the top of my head there. What they call that, but it's not the same thing. But Hargrave is scheduled now to get a bump up to in the $2 million range, whatever the lowest restricted free agent tender is. That's what he'll jump up to, and he already had this in the bag after his second season because he had hit all the playtime percentages there. So this has been forthcoming for a little while here. Now the question becomes is. The biggest question I think when it comes to Hargrave is, will the Steelers extend his contract? Sometime you would think if something like that were to happen, it would happen during training camp and all. Obviously, it wouldn't. You're not going to break the bank to do anything related to that. They obviously, Jesse James played under the proven performance escalator last season, and he didn't get an extension. But Hargrave is considered, I guess, more of a starter than Jesse James is. So it'll be interesting to see, if the Steelers do indeed decide to sign Javon Hargrave to an extension at any point during the offseason. I think it could go either way. You can make you can make a prediction either way, and I wouldn't fault you on that. So there's something related to Javon Hargrave that I'll be posting about later today.
Okay, reader emails. What do we got?
All right, Jonathan Mason writes in, with the Steelers taking their time at this point, do you think Keith Butler and Danny Smith will even be gone? I keep hearing the Steelers like to take their time with the decisions, but how long does it take to figure out your team would be better without them or not? Thanks for answering reader emails. Jonathan, I think we kind of hit this near the opening of the show. If it gets past this weekend, maybe it's time to worry.
Yeah, I think by the end of this week would be my presumed deadline. I think Danny Smith will stay. I thought that from the beginning. I thought it was possible he would get canned as kind of a scapegoat situation, but I thought he was going to stay. I thought Butler would be gone, and I still hope he's gone, but I don't know what's going to happen.
All right, here's one from Tony Tremaine. Being in New Zealand, he's from New Zealand. We are brought up on rugby and American football, the game in American football, the game overall, as well as the intricacies, is not something we are not naturally brought up on. A few years back when I started following, became emotionally invested in the Steelers, I came upon you guys and would like to think I've learned a lot about both the game and the Steelers from all you guys, so thank you. That being said, he does have a question, which is probably a bit too early in the scheme of things, as I know you guys still have draft work to do. Any initial thoughts on Mack Wilson if he declares for the draft? I'm not sure at this stage if he will. Maybe at number 22, maybe not. Good fit for linebacker. Do you know anything about Mack Wilson? Because I have not even studied him yet.
Yeah, I haven't watched him in depth. He was in the championship game, so I saw him then. Obviously we're going to talk a lot about Mack Wilson, Devin White at linebacker for LSU, Byron Murphy at corner, who we talked about earlier today. Those are probably going to be some of those popular names. But given how early it is in the process, I think the deadline for declaring is, today or tomorrow, so we're not even at that point yet. I'm going to hold off before talking too much about one guy because I got to get through the tape and start getting familiar with these players as well.
Has he? I don't think I haven't. I know on December 17th. Hinted that he will return for his senior year, but that's been over. I mean, that's a couple of weeks ago, so I haven't heard anything to the contrary about him declaring. Have you?
I haven't. I have not paid much attention to it, to be honest. What's the deadline to declare?
It's coming up, and in fact, I just
saw today or tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's this weekend.
So this weekend?
Or by this weekend. I just saw it in the NFL official releases. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick here while we're talking here.
Yeah, I thought it was really soon, definitely by this weekend, but I thought it was this next day or two. January 14th. Okay, you're right. It is this weekend.
Let me see if I can find a press release on that.
Well,
14th. I'm reading it on the NFL site right now. Deadline for college players that are underclassmen to apply for special eligibility, and today is the 9th.
Okay, so the weekend. We'll see.
All right, Tony. Look, this thing usually snowballs, and Alex usually stays about I don't know, 3 paces ahead of me when it comes to this. The light comes on for me around the Senior Bowl, I think, where I'm watching the Senior Bowl practices and then trying to follow along and getting into some quick tape on that, and then like a week after the Senior Bowl, then I'm able to speak the language a little bit a little bit better. So I'm a little bit slower with that's not telling anybody anything new there. I'm a little bit slower at everything that I do, but when it comes to draft work, my light usually doesn't come on. Being able to talk more educated about these guys until a week or two after the Senior Bowl. And that's unfortunately when my first mock drafts usually do as well too. All right, Julio Salgado writes in, first of all, love the show and work everybody puts in. I'm sorry that if this has been answered, doesn't make sense. Let's say that the Steelers trade AB and go into free agency to replace him or obtain a defensive player. How would that affect the comp pick they are getting for letting Bell walk? Okay, I remember reading this and think, okay, this is something I want to hit on this show. Remember, keep this in mind when it comes to compensatory picks. Compensatory picks are awarded for what happened the season before during free agency. So anything that happens with any of the Steelers unrestricted free agents this year, net gains and losses this year won't go in. You won't see the compensatory picks or the values for until next year. It always runs the season after the previous season's free agency. So, whatever happens with Bell during free agency this year, that value's not going to be accounted for until the 2020 compensatory picks. So I think that should clear up the things that you have when it comes to compensatory picks, Julio. All right, you got a train going by there?
I
do. Let's see here. I don't know the first name, Jay Barbardi writes in, Tuitt is arguably the most physically gifted player on the roster, but it is yet to translate to production or game-changing plays. Is this scheme? Has his play justified his contract? What kind of year does he need in 2019 to be worth it? Go ahead.
Ooh, that is a really good question. Yeah, I mean, short answer is no. The play hasn't quite lived up to the contract. I think he's played well. I think he's a good player, but the bottom line is production. And I think what's his career high for Saxon a year? Like 6.5, I think. I mean, it's not where you want it to be for how talented
he's missed a lot of them.
Yeah, but he's played in 14 games 3 of the last 4 seasons. So he's played a bulk of the time. There hasn't been an 8-game kind of season, and still the production should be higher. I mean, he had 5.5 sacks this year, 3 sacks last year, granted in just 12 games. He played through the biceps injury, 4 sacks in 2016, 6.5 in 2015, which was his career high. So he's only had 1 season touching 6 sacks. For the money he's making, that production's got to be up. I mean, there's no getting around it.
Yeah, you would like to see it increase. He's not a guy that I'm looking at right now and thinking, man, if it doesn't get to this, then I need to think about cutting him.
No, I'm not there either. And I think he's a better player than the numbers show, but you'd like to see the numbers get to the level of where he can be and where he's capable of playing.
And neither one of us think it's scheme related.
For the most part, no. I think there's still sometimes too much slanting and stunning for these guys, making them play more contained to let the backers get free, which kind of hurts the numbers, but I can't use that as much of an excuse.
All right, thanks for that question. Jeff Perry writes in, great job at the show. Keep it up. 2 questions. Take your pick. Do you think our fans have too short a memory? Oh, yeah, we're all guilty of that, Jeff. Remember all the drama in the Cowher era. Cordell Stewart, should he start or not? The buses last year, and we were playing him when he is slow and overweight and old. Tommy Maddox in the XFL quarterbacker Big Ben. Joey Porter gets a shot after a fight. Cowher not being able to win the big game. We have seen this before, but much worse but a different cast of characters. Sure, further you get away from those things, your recency bias kicks in. I think we're all guilty of that to some degree. And look, some of these people like Alex were how old? I mean,
not very old.
Some people just don't remember, and all they remember is what happened recently. So point taken there. And I think with any fan base, you see that kind of stuff happen. We'll go ahead and read a second part too. When was the last time our defense was dominant from a statistical takeaway standpoint, and was that due to coaching or player personnel? I was thinking 2010, specifically what unit on defense led the way. I think it was middle linebackers and safeties. How far are we from achieving that again? Can we do that in the draft of free agents? If so, why don't you talk more about those names and players? Jeez, that's a loaded question. Didn't we just go over recently the takeaways and all on defense?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the question, a couple points he made. Is it talent or is it coaching? It's always both. When you have defenses that play at an elite level like that, you look at, LeBeau's defense with the elite talent he had with Troy and Harrison, Woodley, Clark, Ike, Ferrier. You guys know all the names there. You throughout the mid-2000s to the late 2000s. And then you look at Baltimore today with a great DC in Wink Martindale and with great players. That's how you get a really elite defense, good coaching, good players. And are the Steelers close to getting to that level? No, they are not close, unfortunately. And
it was either you or Matthew recently wrote about. I mean, look, they had their opportunities to take the football away this year.
Yeah, they led the league in dropped interceptions.
They should have had at least, I forget what the number is, but they were there. I mean, there were a few of them right in the hands that they dropped, especially the secondary guys. So, I mean, yeah, I went back and looked recently. I think it was like 2000 and the last time they won the Super Bowl in like 2008. I think 25 times. It's like 25 or 28 times that season that an offensive possession started on the other side of the 50. I mean, that's a lot of short fields. And
how many times did it happen this year? Do you know the number?
Yeah, I just recently went over that too. It was like 11 or 12, something like that. It wasn't, obviously it wasn't high enough, and that's a mark of defense and special teams just not giving you the splash plays. I mean, sacks all look fine, but if you're not stripping it out at certain instances, you're not getting turnovers, and your return teams are not returning it, giving you a pop here and there. I mean, and that's why I posted about the Steelers offense having to work so hard like they did. So, I mean, it's a point taken, Jeff, and I don't think I think you're kind of preaching to the choir here. Yeah, they got to make more plays on defense. It's just not about letting a team drive 10 plays and stalling and hoping you get a play on third down to get off the field to produce a field goal or something like that. You got to start stealing some possessions in here and providing some shorter fields. So, we talked earlier in the show, how much turnovers are going to be on this team, and you talk about names and players. We don't know yet. We got to get into this free agency process and into this draft process. And I think I speak for Alex too. We want to see a lot more defensive draft picks again this year.
Definitely.
All right, from Josh, another one on Keith Butler. Let's see. Steelers defense has been front page since high school. I want to thank you guys. Podcast, keep up the good work. If Keith Butler does not get fired by the end of the week, assuming all the exit interviews are over, do you think the Steelers will keep him around? If you don't think this threshold for him being fired is the end of this week, when do you believe it is? Once again, Josh, I'd get a little bit worried if we get through the weekend and nothing happens.
I believe it's the end of the week. I think we don't hear anything Friday. I think he stays.
All right, from Rick Wetzel. Say the Steelers don't fire the Butler. Well, then we don't get well, then they got to get him some better parts, right? Yes, we would agree. Obviously, they don't stand pat and expect any significant improvement with this defense. So where are they going to get these players? Free agency? Any guys out there you see them targeting? It's kind of trades. Rick, it's still kind of early in this process. I mean, this team has just never been, if you look at the history, unless they change what they've done in the past, they've never been outside of like a Joe Hayden that comes free, late in the process. They've never really been big players in the free agency process, especially when it kind of comes to guys like, entering like their second contract type guys.
But they've never also had this kind of cap space, presumed cap space either.
Yeah, but this is going to get, and I think people are going to be surprised, Alex. This is going to slowly start getting eroded away. We talked about Javon Hargrave, this stuff. And when you talk about their own free agents that they're going to want to sign, and there's going to be a few of those. When you start talking about the one restricted guy in Finney, what are they going to do there? This is going to slowly start eroding away. Yes, they're going to probably have more, or they will have more space than they will have had in previous years. But this team just never has been, at least in the Colbert era, ones that go out and make the huge splash. I mean, it's always been the Morgan Burnett's, the John Bosticks. I mean, we both agree that Joe Hayden was a bit of a surprise, and they do need to try to look at making a bigger splash, because I think you're asking a lot for a rookie to come in and be an impact player.
Isn't it a mistake to not make that bigger splash? I'm not saying you have to give a guy $12 million a year, but I've been in that $8 to $10 million range, because I think it's a mistake to not make that aggressive move, because this is the year you have to make an aggressive move for a million reasons, because of the window, because of the needs you have, because of just how underachieving this team has been. This is the year to make a move. What are you waiting for?
Well, yeah, you're probably, but so are other teams too. That's the thing. Is you're not the only team looking for free agency help.
No, I understand, but
you got to be willing to pony up the money to do it.
Yeah, and I mean that's what I'm saying. They have to be willing to pony up the money. There's no excuse. I'm sorry, there's no excuse this year.
We talk about a guy like Harris in Denver. If something happens there, can they trade for a guy like Patrick Peterson? The Cardinals were pretty adamant last year that they weren't going to trade him. Does the new regime differ in that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. You can talk about any names. I'm just saying you got to find somebody that fits. It may not be this one guy that I want or you want or whatever the fans want, but somebody. I mean, for me, Bradley Roby is going to be at the top of my list, I think.
I get that, but here's the other thing too. We just talked about earlier is, how many new pieces are going to be on? How many new pieces are going to be on this defense?
A lot.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's 4 starting positions that you can address or should address, and you're probably going to see 2 to 3 get addressed.
And how many of those are going to be addressed through free agency?
Again, my approach is you address 1 in free agency, you make a second-tier kind of splash. Maybe you don't get the top guy, you're not spending the most money, but you have one kind of Hayden-like contract, and then you go through free agency. So you have, let's say you can address 3 positions this offseason. You go 1 through free agency, let's say corner, that's what I would like, Bradley Roby, and then you address 2 in the draft. So with some of your 2 of your first 3 picks, you're addressing those positions defensively.
All right, but how many splashes on the defensive side of the ball do you 1, right? I mean, you're not going out and get another safety, right?
We're talking free agency or draft?
Free agency.
One in free agency. I mean, you can do have multiple guys signed, but in terms of the splash, it's one guy, and it's probably going to be either corner or inside linebacker.
Right. I would agree with you there. Now the question is will they pony up to go get it? Because we already talked about how on paper right now things change and all like that. The cornerback free agency class doesn't look great on paper right now.
Right. But my point is they need to pony up somewhere. Maybe it isn't corner because of the names. That's fine. I'm not trying to get attached to one position or one name. You shouldn't do that. But it's got to come from somewhere. Because to address all the issues on defense, you can't do that solely through a draft. It's not going to work, and you don't have the time to wait for it to work.
All right, from Ted Webb, if AB is gone by draft, I know big if, just wondering, we have Juju, James Washington, Eli Rogers, Ryan Switzer, DHB, and Justin Hunter probably going to camp. I don't think it's a slam dunk that DHB and Justin Hunter go to camp. If they do, they better stay at camp. From there, I don't know if I can stomach another season. And like I've said several times, I've been a big DHB supporter in the past for what he brings at at special teams, but it's time to. Why even have the temptation there? Justin Hunter, I mean, that ship has sailed there. So let's leave it there. Juju, James Washington, and Eli Rogers. And say what you will about Eli Rogers, he's a bit player. All right, so he goes on to say, we all know we need defensive playmakers, but what round would you take a wide receiver in, or maybe get a free agent veteran instead? I like those third, fourth round, 6'4", fast as a gazelle that might not have their head screwed on straight.
So Martavis Bryant.
Yes.
Sammy Coates.
I like those guys there. And a guy that you might not be able to get on the field right away, but a guy that can help. You know, like I said, I mean, 6'3", 6'4", runs like a deer, and maybe drop because of not having the head screwed on straight.
Yep, that makes total sense. I agree.
Do you expect them to take a wide receiver? Where we sit now, regardless of what happens with AB, regardless, do you think they'll take draft a wide receiver?
Well, it's hard to say regardless of AB, because if you trade AB, it certainly becomes a much bigger need. It's possible. I still look, for me, my surprise position this team will address early in the draft, the way they did tackle last year, is defensive line. I think they had a defensive lineman in the third, fourth round. All
right, we're running a little bit long here, but I want to try to get we put the call out to get these in. I feel bad when we don't read these, Alex. Michael Pepitone. Big fan of the show. Terrible Cup podcast has improved my NFL IQ. Thank you for that. In the time frame of mainstream coverage I've ever seen in my 24 years. Thank you, Michael. Getting to the point, what are your forecasts with Mason Rudolph moving forward? Obviously, chatter about him pretty much died after the preseason, but how has he progressed in practice as a practice squad leader and overall player in 2018 season? Neither one of us can answer that question, that part of the question here, because we don't see him in practice during the year, and he obviously was inactive for all 16 games. So all we have to go on is what we saw in the preseason and what Alex saw in camp. He goes on to write, new Ben deal means what for him? The signing of Brogan. Another question is, the signing of Brogan Roback is normal, but begs the question of the status of the current back situation. No, I don't think so. I mean, look, you want that off-season arm in there, that extra arm in there, and you never know what's going to happen as far as injuries go and all like that. So you want a nice little stable of three backups behind Ben during the offseason. So I wouldn't read too much into the Brogan Roback signing at all. It was a guy they brought in for if memory serves me, for a pre-draft visit there. So that's there's nothing new there. As far as what are the forecasts with Mason Rudolph? Man, Alex, I would hope he's able to not only push Joshua Dobbs this year. I would the expectation is for him to be the Steelers' number 2 quarterback in 2019. I would think.
Yep. I mean, they're going to battle it out. He won't be handed that job, but the expectation, as you said, should be for him to become the number 2. If he doesn't, then that's a bit of a concern. And for the other question about adding a fourth quarterback, that's very common. Steelers always take 4 quarterbacks to training camp, and in a year where Ben threw 675 attempts, that arm's going to need a lot of rest this offseason. So more reps with the other guys.
What is the possibility? I'm just going to throw this out there because.
Oh God.
What is the possibility of dealing a guy like Joshua Dobbs or Mason Rudolph during this year's draft? I say basically 0 to Rudolph, because I think they like him so much. You know, why trade a guy that you think is the heir to Ben for Dobbs? Sure, that's possible. I have 10% chance that happens, but I think you want to, I think that a trade wouldn't happen until Rudolph has established himself as a number 2. So late in camp maybe, and then you deal Dobbs. Maybe. All right, let's say you see what, because you better see what you want to see out of Mason Rudolph during the preseason. In training camp as well too. And then at the same time, there's no, put it to you this way, we ought to see a lot of Dobbs and Mason Rudolph throughout the preseason again. I mean, a lot. I mean, we don't need, there's no Landry Jones to worry about getting him, 50 snaps. You don't need to get been but just a handful. So we ought to see a lot of those two younger quarterbacks. And then you assuming Brogan Roback makes it, that far, a series or two with him, maybe at best a game there. Probably not even that there. But what could you get for a guy like Joshua Dobbs? I think you need to explore it, maybe, especially if Dobbs has a good preseason.
Yeah, I don't think you do anything until Rudolph shows himself, because maybe Rudolph falls flat on his face, and you trade away Dobbs, and you're in a difficult situation. So you're not making any moves until Rudolph has taken the steps that you need him to take, and from there, maybe you can get a 6th-round pick for him.
And he ends his P.S. Dave, you mentioned quite long ago that you had a lot of stories, quote unquote, as a salesman in Florida, Alabama area, and all up and down God's country down south. Do tell when you have a chance. Oh Lord, yeah, that would have to have a parental guidance warning on. I'll tell you this: there was times where I was living out of hotels, and you'd go on sales calls for 12, 13 hours a day, and then you just go back to the hotel with the other guys and just play cards and just get obliterated, and then go on 2 hours of sleep and start all over again. I could tell you some stories from down there. Maybe I will at one point. John Davis, one last one. Joe Corey tweeted an article today that stated that only the 1994 49ers with Young and Rice had ever won a Super Bowl with two players taking up 21.6% or more of the cap. The theme of course, is that teams with young, inexperienced quarterbacks have a huge advantage in building championship team, and those paying established superstars don't have enough left over to build the rest of the roster. My question is how much do Ben and AB take up? And out of curiosity, how much would Ben, AB, and Le'Veon have taken up if he had played this year under the tag? Well, what was AB's number? You're talking 50 million? Is that right? Right around there? Well, yeah, it would have taken up a bunch. And I get the point that Joe Corey's making there. And yes, when you add in the Steelers' offensive line on top of that, and a couple of the guys making what they're making. Yeah, but let's not forget the Steelers have some money invested in their defense too, in Cameron Hayward, in Stephon Tuitt, in Joe Hayden, one of the top cap hits this past season as well too. So they have it sprinkled throughout. Here's the thing with the cap: it's massageable. You can massage the cap. Talking about restructure, we see the Steelers do this with the restructures. And I know it drives a lot of people crazy, but just looking at the cap hits alone and using that, and you're not going to find me have any more respect for a guy than Joe Corey, but just using that as a reason alone, I don't think is enough because of today's day and age of how you can massage the cap. So you just have to do a better job of evaluating talent on top of that, because, like I said, the Steelers have more than just, and they didn't technically have Bell under the contract this year, so you can't use his cap hit as an excuse. Even though, yes, you did have to carry that number until you got credited it throughout the season here. I understand where the analysis is coming from. But my answer to that is that you can massage the cap in so many different ways with the restructures and all. That shouldn't be the lone reason of why you're not winning.
I think you summed it up well.
All right, man, I hate not getting to some of these. One last one here, Alex. Tim McNichol writes in, relatively new listener, just listened to the show. Love all the content you provide. My question is regarding Antonio Brown's cousin, Marquise Hollywood Brown. Assuming the Steelers trade Brown prior to next season, would drafting Hollywood be a move they could make to address depth? I'm not sure what his overall draft value and how rise or fall between Combine, Pro Day. Just have an idea. Haven't heard thrown around much. Would be funny. It would be something funny to throw in AB's face as well too. I would never look at it as something thrown into AB. Look, that kid's talented, and I haven't even gotten into his tape. Now he did have the late, ankle injury?
I don't know.
Knee injury, whatever it was that he got dinged up late in the season there. A little bit undersized guy as well too. A guy you have to watch for sure, but I think he's a guy you have to consider, but with already a moniker of Hollywood and being AB's cousin might be a little bit of a red flag there, if you get what I'm saying. So definitely a guy that you can expect us to break down on the site in the coming weeks and months. Right, Alex?
Yeah, he's an electric player, really exciting. Real quick, last note, report, I think from Pro Football Talk says that Munchak is still the favorite in Denver, but Vic Fangio is, quote, hell-bent on becoming head coach, even going so far as to letting Elway pick his staff. So really seems 50-50 in that race.
Yeah, and as soon as we get off this, which is going to be in here in just a minute, here it comes. So, look, keep these questions coming in. We apologize if we don't get to everything, but we like having that mailbox full so we can go over these things because we're going to have a lot more free time here coming up soon as well. And hopefully it's not going to be all about Antonio Brown talk. And we apologize for these things running into the 90-minute realm, but what else you going to do right now? In the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. You can follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. You can follow the show at Terrible Podcast. You can, of course, email us, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks for those of you who donate to the cause as well, too. Those of you that may have donated in the past and don't any longer, thanks for your past contributions. Those are important to keeping this show is rolling as well too. If you'd like to start or resume donating, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit that donate button up right navigational bar. And until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.